Every hobby needs a cult favorite at the entry point to get people excited about. In our case, watches collecting as a hobby, we need an accessible, generally quite likable and well-respected watch. The Seiko SKX 007 fits that description perfectly. Today we've got two watches, one from Cadisen, one from Tandorio. They homage the SKX 007 and I think they've done a pretty good job. Now both of these watches feature premium materials, premium components and nice designs. So it's not going to be easy to decipher which one of these two watches brings more value to us, the wearers of the watches. Some of the features that these watches bring. So both get 316L stainless steel cases and bracelets. Both watches get Jubilee style bracelets with 5 individual elements, warranting an expensive look with a comfortable fit and the links wrapping around your wrist very organically. We get sapphire crystal on both. One of the watches actually gets a 2.5 times magnification cyclops. Both watches get rotating unidirectional bezels featuring 120 clicks, and both of the watches do get 200 meters of water resistance. Now on both the Cadisen and the Tandorio, we do get Seiko's NH35 self-winding automatic movements, 24 joules, 41 hours of power reserve, and all the rest of it. Now these two watches, both of them cost sub $60, and I have already reviewed them in detail. So I will leave the links to the comprehensive reviews of the Tandorio and the Cadisen just below in the description. Also, I've left the links to the listings where I got these watches from, so make sure to check them out if you're after some sharp prices. Now with this comparison video, I will try and get into the details, into the crux of the overlaps as well as the differences of these two watches. And some of the differences are actually key. So sit back and enjoy this review. If we start off with the dimensions, well, the Tandorio gets a diameter of 41 millimeters, a lug-to-lug of 50 millimeters due to the protruding male end links, a height of 14 millimeters, a lug width of 22 millimeters, and a weight of 170 grams before I removed any of the links to fit my 6.5-inch wrist. The Cadisen is smaller, a diameter of 40 millimeters, lug-to-lug length of 45.8 millimeters due to the inverted end links, a lug width of 20 millimeters, a height of 12.4, and a weight of just 150 grams. The first differences that we start seeing are in the sizes of the watches. Considering the physical aspects, the Tandorio is larger by all means, yet the lug-to-lug is significantly larger by a whopping 4.2 millimeters, even though the case is just 41 over 40 millimeters. The protruding male end links are not doing any favors here at all. Also, the bracelet is 10% wider on the Tandorio. That is very much significant. But physical dimensions aside, the orange just looks larger than the darker blue. So let's keep that in mind as we keep watching. First, let's look at the case design, starting with the Tandorio. And looking at the profile, we see the distinct layering of the watch case. On the bottom half, the rounded and convex flanks. They're not cushion-like, yet there is curvature on the bottom and top tips. The lugs curve downward here, the case walls are mirror polished, yet the polishing is not high gloss. It's a subdued, calm and assertive finish. The transition to the lug hoods is made via smoothed and well-rounded bevels. The lug hoods get a fine brushed effect and there's no significant contrast between the case walls and lug hoods. And now if we take a look at the Cadisen, well, the case walls here are mirror polished, nice and bright. Evenly and consistently, the case walls transition to the lug hoods via smooth and rounded bevels as well. The lug hoods actually get a fine radial brushing style, circling the 120-click unidirectional bezel. But before we jump into the bezels, I think it's clear that the Cadisen offers a more polished look, not in terms of actual polishing styling, but rather a more strict appearance, more dressy in a way. If we jump onto the bezels, well, for the Tandorio, the bezel edge is actually polished to a high gloss, hence the grooves around the circumference enjoy plentiful reflections between the angles, and that sort of fits because the case is not very bright nor very shiny. The threading is rather wide on this bezel, and even though the grooves are rounded and polished, there is enough grip to make the bezel rotation convenient. On the Cadisen, the bezel is also quite tall with wide threading. I find the grooves not being too deep, even more shallow than on the Tandorio. And even if the edges are mirror polished, there is sufficient grip, if not simply due to the large surface area under the fingertips due to the height of the bezel edge. The styling overlaps and differences are obvious, but I will mention them nonetheless. So the Tandorio gets a black bezel, while Cadisen gets the black and blue bezel, black on top, blue at the bottom. I think that makes a subtly more interesting color palette here, and it just spices things up. Both bezels are rather slim when gazing down, and that is in line with the original watch. My biggest qualm with the Caddy bezel is the omission of a 12 o'clock pip. Even the upside down triangle is not loomed here. That is a significant oversight in my opinion. Now let's talk about the bezel action of these two watches. So on the Tandorio, the bezel rotation experience is okay, and that's at best. The precision is a bit sloppy due to the significant backplay between clicks. The same comment applies to Cadisen's performance as well. The bezel action gets more resistance on the Tandorio, it's heavy and consistent throughout the rotation cycle, while on the Caddy, the resistance is much more light and the feel is more tacky. Both bezels align at 12 o'clock. The sound is ratchety and clangy and metally on both, but I still prefer the more distinctive clicks on the Tandorio. In summary, both bezels don't impress, yet the Caddy is second best on this front. Now, I do have to say this, we need to remember we're talking about watches that cost $52 and $55, so sub $60. These are very budget watches that have premium materials on them, and they do look and work fine, and they're both automatic. Now, I'm not making excuses for these two watches, but all I'm saying is that we need to keep in mind that these are budget watches. Let's keep going. On the right hand side of the watch cases, we see our guarded crowns. Well, both of these crowns are actually screw-in. The Tandorio gets a massive 8mm diameter piece, which overwhelms the 5.5mm on the Cadisen. I feel like the smaller crown on the Cadisen is slightly too small, as my finger did catch the guards once or twice on rotation. Considering both are 200 meters water resistant divers, operating such a small crown guard underwater could be challenging, especially when wearing gloves. So another practicality win by Tandorio. So now let's talk about the bracelets, because these things are definitely positives for both watches. Then we'll talk about the dials, the crystals, and of course a lume test to follow. On both timepieces, the solid end links integrate seamlessly into the case. Now on the Tandorio, we do get protruding male end links, while on the Caddy, we get the inverted end links. On both of the watches, the outer faces get semicircular links which are smooth and refined. They are bead-like and satisfying to the touch. In regards to the tolerances, Tandorios feel better, yet the fluidity point goes to Caddy. The clasps are similar in terms of overall build quality and feature set. Both get press folding clasps with a security latch and 3 micro adjustments, yet Cadisen did sign their clasp, while Tandorio did not. The bracelets are definitely well refined and they do suit the overall look. Now, especially for the Tandorio, where the lug to lug width is 22mm, this bracelet is meaty and there are sufficient light play and reflections on it to sort of compensate for the more, I don't want to say dull, but the less interesting or less polished case. With the Caddy, this is a more elegant bracelet. It's a bit thinner, and I'm talking not just the girth of the bracelet, but also the thickness or the height of the individual links. So both bracelets suit the cases of the watches they're on. But now it's time to discuss the crystals. Well, both feature flat slabs of sapphire glass with anti-reflective coating. The elephant in the room is the Cyclops on the Cadisen. This is a controversial design decision, especially considering the Cyclops is mineral glass. So how will it fare over time, considering that the Cyclops does protrude above the sapphire crystal? So Every time you do get a knock, most likely it will land first on the Cyclops, and that will get scratched. If we talk about the dials, on the Tandorio there is a deep and slanting riho leading down to the dial. The minute track is actually printed on the circumference of the riho. We get similar styling on the Cadisen. The dial gets a satin-like finish, it's not matte, yet not really glossy either. And we still get a subtle sunburst effect, shooting rays of orange from the pinions to the dial edges. While on the Cadisen there is a much more pronounced sunburst effect. We do get a glossy dial here. It's glossy blue and the sunburst effect is just more pronounced and more bright. The indices are applied on both watches, but note that the indices are edged in black on the Tandorio and edged in chrome silver on the Cadisen. On the Cadisen blue, the white hands with silver edging is good. On the orange, the white hands edged in black are just as legible, so clarity and legibility is not an issue here. But now let's finish off with a lume test. Firstly, notice the lack of the bezel pip on the Cadisen. As already mentioned, that's an oversight and quite a significant one. We get the blue lume on the Caddy and we get the green lume on the Tandorio. And we can see that the lume is applied consistently across the two dials. Yet the green on the Tandorio is more bright and actually lasts longer. So what can we make out of these two watches? I think both homages are very interesting. Now the Tandorio is definitely more relaxed, it's sort of bigger, more chunkier, but it works for me. I like the orange, I like the black, I love the whole meaty bracelet. It just feels so alive. While the Caddy is a bit more of a strict design, it looks a bit more dressy, maybe because of that additional polishing that we get on the case flanks. Again, a slightly more elegant bracelet. It's a good watch, definitely. Both feature the same automatic movements on there, so they're both dependable. They both have 200 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, all the rest of it. But it just seems that the Tandorio is slightly better in terms of bezel action. It doesn't have that Cyclops just full stop, right? So it doesn't give you that additional risk that a mineral glass Cyclops brings on the Caddy. What I do like on the Cadisen though is that dual tone, so the black and blue bezel. I think the Cadisen is more elegant and more interesting. So I personally favor the Tandorio slightly more over the Cadisen. But let me know your thoughts about these two watches in the comments below the video. Also check out the comprehensive reviews. I've left the links below and check out the links to the listings. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.